There are some foods that 5 or 6 years ago, I would never have had in my diet because I would have found various reasons why they were bad. But now I look at them a little bit different. Now my stance on processed food has not changed. I think hyperpalatable garbage is still hyperpalatable garbage. But there are some foods that I now bring back into my life that I feel really are actually adding more benefit than detriment. And maybe this could open your eyes to some things too. Now the first one is one that might surprise you. That's tropical fruits. Now I've always been a fan of small amounts of berries and fruit in general. Like even when I was super strict keto, very low carb, I would still have a fair bit of berries, strawberries, blackberries, blueberries. But I was always pretty firm with the world of tropical fruits because I was afraid of the sugar. But now as more and more research is coming out on moderate amounts of these tropical fruits like papayas and guavas and plantains and some of the phenolic compounds and specific fibers that are in tropical fruits, it's becoming more and more interesting. And even pineapple having specific impacts on sleep, like we've seen Dr. Andrew Huberman talk about, like kiwis and pineapple. It's kind of interesting. So I don't have a ton of it, but I'll maybe have a half a cup serving or so, a chunk of mango, or if I'm in Hawaii, I'll enjoy a papaya. And you know what? It doesn't seem to impact my glucose all that much as long as I'm active. So this doesn't mean go to town on it, but it's something that I've changed my stance on a fair bit. This next one is one that I used to be very, very strict on, and that was the world of deli meat and cold cuts. And in some ways, I've become even more strict with how I look at them, but I've become a lot more laxed in how I allow them in my diet. Now, before you turn off this video thinking I've lost my mind and I'm eating processed meat, that's not the case. That's just the problem. Like if you go to a deli meat section and you look at like Applegate Farms, or you look at some of these other like Distel, you can see there's ones that are literally just chicken, salt, and rosemary. Like there's perfectly good options for cold cuts. As a matter of fact, things like Parma ham, prosciutto, which is considered a processed meat, there are literally studies that demonstrate that there are biopeptides in things like Parma ham and prosciutto that actually have beneficial health impact and beneficial metabolic impact. So it's not like we shouldn't be throwing the baby out with the bathwater at all, but we should also be very strict on our criteria. In fact, if you want me to do a video specifically on cold cuts, I will. Pop the comment down below and I'll take a look at those afterwards. So it's definitely a viable thing, right? You pop into a grocery store, you need some quick protein. I think if I prioritize protein first, then cold cuts are just gonna be an option. It's better than a protein bar. This next one is really wild. Hear me out on this. Honey. There are phenolic compounds and polyphenols in honey that are seemingly very, very powerful, not just for the immune system, but also anti-inflammatory effects and antimicrobial effects. Some of this data has been around for a very long time. Some of it's new. But what's really cool is we're actually seeing data that there's a specific sugar in honey called trehalose. And when trehalose is combined with sucrose, it can still lower blood sugar because trehalose will bind to a specific transporter for sugar. There's a study that was published in the journal Nutritional Science and Vitaminology that took a look at trehalose, a sugar in honey, alongside sucrose, and they found that it ended up lowering their fasting glucose because that trehalose bound to that specific transporter. Now this transporter is called the SLC2A, so it's kind of a complex transporter, but essentially it's one mechanism in which sugar gets into the bloodstream, and trehalose seems to sort of block it. It's quite interesting, but if you look at the larger scale data, you see people that add a little bit of honey into their diet actually have lower fasting glucose. Now, before you turn off this video thinking that I'm just on the sugar train, I want you to hear me out on this. The type of honey matters too. Okay, raw honey is completely different than processed honey. So you want to opt for the raw honey. Clover honey seems to be the best. So raw honey doesn't become denatured. It has those compounds. It has those antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory compounds. So how much honey do I add in? Do I put it in my coffee every day and start my day off to Sugarville? No. I might put a half a tablespoon in a little bit of yogurt. I might put a half a tablespoon in a little bit of cottage cheese, like every 3 days. The thing is, I'm just not afraid of it. I used to before be like, that's pure sugar, not touching it, no way, no how. Now I see the health benefits of things like Manuka honey in moderation. I see the realistic aspect of getting honey now and then and how it could nourish our body and provide us with Well, I don't know, some interesting sugars like trehalose that are absorbed differently and phenolic compounds. Now, this next one is one that's super wild that you probably never would have thought I'd change my mind on if you were watching me, I don't know, 8 years ago. But before I dive into that one, almost all the things that I'm talking about today, you can get through Thrive Market. And I don't mean that in any kind of contrived way like, oh, hey, I'm talking about this product, here's Thrive Market. No, I'm just being real. That's a 30% off discount link. And Thrive Market is an online grocery store that is membership based, but allows you to sort by diet type, like low FODMAP if you have bloating issues, sort by autoimmune paleo type diets, sort by low carb, sort by vegan. It's crazy cool. So you can sort by diet type and then everything gets delivered to your doorstep, but they don't have any processed garbage. They have strict guidelines for not having the same kind of garbage you would see in a regular grocery store. So it is a complete game changer because you know the things you're getting from there are vetted out. You can opt for no sugar, you can opt for baked goods, it sorts and it's so easy and then it's delivered to your doorstep. But let's be real, the biggest reason you should be checking them out is it can change your life and save you some cash with that 30% off discount link and a free $50 gift when you use Thrive Market. So I'm serious, the things that I'm talking about, like the honey, you can get that there. Some of these other things I'm about to talk about, you could also find on Thrive Market. So definitely check them out after this video. That link is down below in the description. So this next one that I'm talking about is milk. Okay, I'm not just going out and I'm not just buying a regular jug of like Lucerne milk. Okay, I'm paying attention. In California, fortunately, I can get raw milk. Okay, now raw milk is only allowed in, I think, like 8 or 9 states, so I know I'm talking to a small audience here. But I've just relaxed my stances on dairy in general. Like, I even did some videos a while back, like a long time ago, where I was concerned about the inflammatory effects of dairy. Now you realize the beneficial effects of dairy, like conjugated linoleic acid, which is huge when it comes down to weight loss. There's a lot of data to back it up. But when you start looking at like the probiotics in kefir, in yogurt, in cottage cheese, in raw dairy, you have some huge immunomodulatory effects. Like there's some cool data that looked at children that were given raw milk versus some other things, and they found that raw milk ended up improving their immune response better. So there's definitely some benefit there. So does that mean that you go out and you guzzle a bunch of milk? No, I mean, we still have to be real. There's a lot of sugar in it. Now, I know it's not technically organic, and this is not a plug, but there's that company Fairlife, which if you really enjoy milk and you kind of want to reduce the sugar intake, it's kind of a cool find. Max Lugavere turned me on to it. Less sugar, higher protein, overall less calories. That's a cool option if you're trying to find a better option for milk and you can't get raw milk. Otherwise, that A2 brand is pretty cool. They try to get it from grass-fed cows, so it's an A2 protein. You should just try to opt for the grass-fed milk. I actually think it tastes better anyway. So I've relaxed my stance on that. How much do I have? Oh, I don't know. I might make a protein shake with raw milk like maybe 2 or 3 times per week, so I don't go overboard. But I also opt for raw cream when I can, and I just enjoy some good quality dairy. This next one has been in and out of my life for a while, but now I just feel better when I have it a couple times per week. And that is when I'm having carbohydrates, because a lot of times I rotate in and out of low carb, I have lentils. And the unfortunate thing is lentils fall under the microscope all the time in the health community because of lectins. I know Dr. Stephen Gundry talks about that. He's hard opposed to those lectins. But when we look at lectins in small amounts, if they are quote unquote toxic or a poison, couldn't they be treated as a small hormetic stressor for our gut? Like if you remove them all entirely and then introduce them, maybe it's a problem. But in small amounts, maybe they actually strengthen our gut. Maybe they actually have some benefit. The benefit that I get from legumes and from things like lentils, I'm getting some of the lowest glycemic carbohydrates I could get. I can adhere to a Mediterranean style diet without huge glucose spikes. I don't have to have brown rice pasta. I don't have to have wheat. I don't have to have bread. But you give me a little bit of lentil pasta or a nice bowl of lentils so I can enjoy some curry with my kids and have some lentils with it and have some dal, right? I can enjoy these kinds of foods and I don't get a huge glucose spike. Do I have them all the time? Not at all, but I've definitely relaxed my stance on them. Next up, I used to just go for 100% dark chocolate, like all the way. It was just 100% baking chocolate, or I would go for a sugar-free chocolate. But now I've started to see some data that the phenolic compounds and the polyphenols, or more so the flavonoids, in dark chocolate can override a small amount of sugar. So why am I going for 100% dark chocolate that doesn't taste good, when realistically I can go for 85 to 95% dark chocolate with this much sugar in it? It tastes a million times better. And the data is still strong that shows that even when there's a little bit of sugar in it, the phenolic compounds in the dark chocolate, or I guess I should say more accurately, the flavonoids, they end up counteracting the negative aspects of the sugar. still can see lower glucose, still can see improvements in insulin resistance in metabolically unhealthy people. So the power of dark chocolate is not in the macronutrients, it's in those polyphenols that you're getting out of it. So in that case, I don't go to town on it, but I might allow myself to have 1 ounce every other day or so, and then I still have my 100% unsweetened baking chocolate just because I'm kind of a weirdo. This next one is a particular ingredient. I've relaxed my stance on carrageenan. What? Isn't carrageenan like this terrible inflammatory thing? I've realized over the years, and I did a video on this a little while back, but it just didn't gain any traction. Carrageenan is often mistaken for polygenin, which is also given the name carrageenan. But polygenin is like a super refined, denatured carrageenan. Carrageenan just comes from seaweed, but there's context. Okay, you have to understand, like, if carrageenan is in something like cottage cheese, it's usually just used to help kind of gel and thicken. And it's probably not bad. When carrageenan is used in a hyperpalatable processed food, it might be polygenin and it might be bad. That being said, we used to think that carrageenan was super inflammatory. So we turned to some research. There was a study published in 2001 that took a look at a lot of studies. In fact, it looked at 45 studies and it was published in Critical Reviews in Toxicology. And it found that, at least across animals, we didn't really see much, like carrageenan didn't break down more in the gut into this compound that would be detrimental. But then we look at newer research and we see in people that have sensitive guts, it might increase a little bit of inflammation in people that have IBS and things like that. But the amounts that it was needed to do that was quite a bit. So did I relax on it? Well, I'm not seeking foods out that have carrageenan, let's put it that way. But if I'm on the road and I swing by a Walmart or something and I'm gonna grab some cottage cheese and all they have is a cottage cheese that has a little carrageenan in it, I'm not gonna freak out thinking that it's the end of the world. I still try to limit it, but I've relaxed on it a little bit. And the very last one that I add more in that I used to avoid because I was afraid of estrogen was flax. The benefits of flax are huge. The benefits of the specific lignans in it, the specific fibers, are undeniable. There are specific fibers in flax that might just be literally the most potent fibers to stimulate and help our gut microbiome. I can't turn that away. I can't deny that. And the other thing that's interesting is that when you have the estrogen discussion, I used to think that flax was so bad because so many people said, oh, it's estrogenic, it's a phytoestrogen, it's a phytoestrogen. When you look at the research, small amounts of phytoestrogens can actually be beneficial. Small amounts of estrogen can actually bind to estrogen receptors and block, like the 1,6-hydroxyestradiol, the bad estrogen, from binding. We've seen this in particular studies that look at breast cancer in men where they need to modulate estrogen. Having some phytoestrogens from flax can actually block the bad estrogens from binding because the phytoestrogens bind instead. I will tell you from my honest experience, my estrogen levels are very low. If anything, too low. And I eat like a tablespoon of flax a day. So I don't know what everyone is talking about. As soon as you start gaining body weight, body fat, then yes, it's a little bit more of a concern because things can change because you can go down the cycle of testosterone, aromatase, this whole cycle. But at the end of the day, the benefit in the microbiome outweighs just that small risk, in my opinion. I'll see you tomorrow.